It's that magical time of day when we come together for a special bedtime story. But before we begin our adventure, let's take a moment to get comfy. Find your coziest spot, snuggle up under your warm blankets, and take a few deep, relaxing breaths. Close your eyes for just a moment and let go of all the busyness of the day. Are you ready? Take a deep breath, and let's dive into the fascinating world of our bedtime story. It's time to let your imagination soar. Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Cinderella who lived with her stepmother and two stepsisters. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were very mean to Cinderella and made her do all the chores around the house. One day, an invitation arrived from the royal palace. The prince was having a ball, and all the eligible ladies in the kingdom were invited to attend. Cinderella's stepsisters were very excited about going to the ball and meeting the handsome prince. "I want to go to the ball, too," said Cinderella. But her stepmother just laughed and said, "You cannot go to the ball looking like that, all covered in cinders. You have too much work to do around the house anyway." Cinderella felt very sad that she would not be allowed to go to the ball. She swept the floors, did the laundry, washed the dishes, and made dinner for her stepmother and stepsisters while they got ready for the ball. The stepsisters put on their finest gowns and fussed over their hair and makeup before leaving in a carriage for the royal ball, leaving Cinderella behind to finish her chores. After they left, Cinderella sat down by the fireplace and cried. Suddenly, her fairy godmother appeared in a sparkle of light. "Don't cry, child," said the fairy godmother kindly. "You shall go to the ball, but first let's get you ready." She turned a pumpkin into a magnificent carriage and mice into horses. She then touched Cinderella with her magic wand, changing her ragged dress into a beautiful blue gown and her old shoes into sparkling glass slippers. Cinderella could hardly believe her eyes. "Oh, thank you, fairy godmother," she cried. "Now I can go to the ball." "You're welcome, my dear," said the fairy godmother. "But be sure to leave before midnight, for that is when the magic ends." So Cinderella set off for the royal ball in her splendid carriage. At the palace, the prince was utterly enchanted when he saw Cinderella enter the ballroom. He thought she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. The prince asked Cinderella to dance, and they swept across the floor, lost in each other's eyes. Cinderella was having so much fun dancing with the prince that she almost forgot her fairy godmother's warning. Suddenly, the clock began to strike midnight. Cinderella gasped and quickly ran from the ballroom, losing one of her glass slippers on the palace steps as she fled. The prince chased after her, but Cinderella disappeared into the night in her carriage before he could discover who she was. "I don't even know her name!" the prince cried. All he had was the delicate glass slipper left behind on the steps. The next day, the prince declared that he would marry the girl whose foot fit the glass slipper. He and his servants went from house to house in the kingdom, trying the slipper on every eligible young maiden. At Cinderella's house, the stepsisters tried and tried to cram their feet into the slipper, but it did not fit either one. "Are there any other young women in the house?" the prince asked. "No, none at all," said the stepmother quickly. But Cinderella peeked out from the kitchen and said, "Please, sir, may I try on the slipper?" Her stepmother protested, but the prince smiled and said, "Of course." Cinderella sat down and slipped her dainty foot into the glass slipper. It fit perfectly. "It is you!" cried the prince joyfully, "the beautiful maiden from the ball." The wicked stepmother and stepsisters were shocked that Cinderella had won the heart of the prince. But Cinderella kindly forgave them for their cruelty, as the prince whisked her away to his castle to become his bride. The wedding was a lavish affair, and the ballroom where they first met was filled with flowers and garlands. At long last, Cinderella had found her happily ever after with the prince.